In this video, we're going to look at a very simplistic model and technique that we can use to predict inheritance when we have discrete variation, where a characteristic can be one thing or the other, but nothing in between. So often you'll see examples given, such as the colours of flowers of peas, because that was one of the original experiments that led to this, done by a man called Mendel. Sometimes the colour of mouse fur can be brown or white, and that's the example I'm going to use. So it's whenever we've got, it can be something or another. So it's either this or that. Usually it's a description, so brown fur or white fur. Long tail or short tail for certain things. Hitchhiker's thumb or normal thumb, that sort of thing. So that means it's controlled by one gene, and that one gene has two possibilities, so the two alleles for that. And one of those alleles is going to be dominant and one is going to be recessive. A dominant allele is always exhibited, so we always see that if it is present. The recessive allele can only be shown if both alleles, remember one from mum and one from dad, so one from each parent in sexual reproduction, the recessive allele can only be expressed or shown in the trait if both alleles are that. And we can show this in the probability of certain characteristics being inherited, and why we have these terms dominant and recessive, I guess, by doing a thing called a Punnett square. And a Punnett square is something like this. Now I'm going to take my example of mice, and I'm going to pretend for this example that mice can only be brown or white. And we're going to pretend that's controlled by one gene. And that one gene has got two possible alleles. A big B will represent the allele or DNA sequence to code for brown fur, and a little b will code for the DNA sequence to code for not brown, so white fur. Now, why have I gone for B, not W? This is a convention. You use the capital B to show the dominant characteristic, and no matter what the recessive characteristic is, you use the lowercase letter of the dominant one to show that. So what I've got here is a pretend situation where I have crossed a white mouse, which means it must have had two little b alleles, with a brown mouse that I know has had offspring that are white in the past. So therefore must be what we call carrying the recessive allele. We call this heterozygous. It's got two different alleles for the same gene. So one of its parents gave it the dominant allele and one of its parents gave it the recessive allele. However, the white mouse, to have white fur, must only have the little b allele. So, because if it had a big B allele, it would be brown. That's what dominant means. So there are some possibilities. Let's say, for argument's sake, that we've got a brown female. So that's mum. And we've got dad is the white one. That means that all of dad's sperm that could fertilise mum's eggs are going to have little b for their allele for this gene. But mum, half of her eggs are going to have the big B from meiosis, and half will have the little b. So, if this egg was fertilised by either of these possibilities for sperm, because they're all going to be the same, then we would get a big B, little b as the two alleles to make our new offspring. But if it was this one, it's the same thing, big B, little b. So those two possibilities would have a brown coat, but they would be carrying the gene for making offspring in the future if they're able to, that have white coats. What we see here is if this ovum or egg is fertilised, then both possibilities give little b, little b. Now these ones would be white. So it's all a probability. There are 4 possible answers here, 4 possible fertilizations. This group of sperm with this ovum, or this group of sperm with this ovum, this group of sperm with this ovum, this group of sperm with this ovum. 4 possibilities. Of those 4, 2 of them are giving us a brown coat. So that is 2 out of 4 is 50%. We have got 2 out of the 4, or 50%, are going to have a white coat. So we can write this as a percentage or as a ratio. I'm just going to slide down a little bit. Hopefully these will fit in. Here are our possible what are called genotypes. So we had none that were big B, big B. So our probability or chance of that happening is 0. The chance of big B, little b is 2 over 4, which is 50%. We also could write this as a ratio, where there are 2 of this and 2 that are not. So it's a 2 to 2 ratio, but that gets simplified to a 1 to 1 ratio. And of course, therefore, little b is the same thing, a 1 to 1 ratio. So there's a 50% chance every time these 2 mice have offspring, there is a 50% chance of each one of them being brown and carrying the allele, for white. So there is a 50% chance of them being brown and a 50% chance of them being white. So if they did have enough offspring, we would expect to see that ratio of 50%, or 1 to 1. One brown for every 1 white offspring.